Wow. I don't know if you can see how clear that river creek is. See those fish right there? Trying to find them again now. They were just right there. Oh, there's some little ones. Huh. Oh, there they are out there. I don't know if you can see them. Boy, there's some big ones right there. Huh. Going downstream. There's one there. Hey guys, this is Arkansas. We got some beautiful rivers here. Really nice place to go swimming. Let's go take a look. Go down the trail here. It's just beautiful. Looking at houses out here. Just looking. Little trail over here. See, this goes up the creek or river, whatever this is. I came over to look at this house. It had 7 acres, but it also had access to the lake. It's right on the lake. It's just a beautiful place. I went and looked at it. And I thought, man, this is perfect. It had everything. It had a well, and there's another cabin on the property. It was just like, yeah, I'm gonna get this. And then I noticed that there was ticks everywhere. Maybe more than where I'm at already. I just don't know what to do. There's something wrong with every piece of property that I find. So I'm still kind of looking. Then I got to looking over in this area around Missouri, northern Arkansas, and man, there is some really very inexpensive homes that anywhere else would be like $500,000, and they're just like $100,000 for amazing, like new homes with acreage. I guess it's partly because of the humidity and ticks. I guess I don't really know, because I suppose it's more expensive than that if you went to other places that have humidity, but I don't know. One of the reasons why that place is as cheap as it was, I guess, it was just remote. It was like about 18 miles from a town, and probably about 10 miles on a county road. So it was kind of remote, but that was a plus for me. There was absolutely nothing wrong with that place. It was perfect. But it just had so many ticks that the dogs and I went down to the lake. Now, that was another thing that's beautiful. And I really never seen before, but the whole lake it had like rock cliffs around it, kind of like, and it was marble. The cliffs themselves were just gray, but at the base of the cliffs, all the rocks on the ground were marble. And some of them, I don't know if you remember, if you've ever seen where people get round rocks and bust them in half, and then inside there's all these little crystals. Well, you see those all over the place. They're like, come on, Dad, it's nice down here. Let's go down this way first. That's a little, let's go down, this is nicer here. This will go down to another part of the river. So I thought, wow, I mean, they were like little rock cliffs where you could jump into the water and it was clear. It was beautiful. It was a big, huge lake. It's like, well, I'll just tell you where the area it was. Bull Shoals Lake Reservoir or something. It's a destination tourist trout fishing area and hunting, and it was just amazing, beautiful. It's not far from right here where I'm at, actually. This is just a few miles from there. Just went and seen the house earlier. And this is the way it looks. But as you can see, it still has all of this kind of humidity, and you know, we're still in Arkansas. So there's still, a lot of Arkansas doesn't have the ticks that Oklahoma did, because I think it was because of the pine trees, but right where that property was, there wasn't a lot of pine trees. There were some, but it was mostly oaks and stuff, just like where I was in Oklahoma. So I'll probably go look at some houses, some more in this area, just while I'm in the area, because I'm really not sure if I can do this. You know, the well, the property is the most important thing, a lot of other things, but not having any ticks is also important to me. So I don't know what I'm going to do. But, oh my goodness, it's beautiful. And as I was thinking, well, maybe it's not as many ticks over here, due to the fact that, you know, there's more pine trees and it's a little different area. A little further north than where I was and stuff, maybe a little bit slightly cooler weather. But, nah, there's ticks everywhere there. But there were so many benefits to that place. It was secluded, beautiful home, little cabin on the property, aside from the home. Carports and sheds and, you know. And then access to the lake, which is right on the lake. And the rocks down there were really neat. You could go down there and sit on the rocks and jump off into the water. But that Bull Shoals Lake was very clean. And Eufaula Lake down in Oklahoma is just filthy dirty. I don't know if it's really dirty, but it, you know, it looks brown because the sand is brown in that area, and so the water just looks dirty, and I don't like that. I love the clean, beautiful water up here. So that's plus. And then of course, see all these creeks around here. I have a river right near where I'm at down there in Oklahoma, where I was, and that river's dirty too. But these rivers aren't. Oh wow, it looks neat down there. Hope I can get, if this goes around. This looks like it's going back to where I started from. Yeah, this is not going where I want it to go. That goes back the same direction. Well, maybe the dogs are right. Maybe if we're going to go down the river, we're going to have to... I don't know, guys. What is all these spider webs? Ah! So I was just watching, I haven't watched Santos in a while, since that last debacle, where I was, whew, man, I don't know if I want to go down here right at the moment, I guess. Probably end up sliding down though. It's a little steep. Find an easier way to get down there. But I was watching, I guess, I don't know if it was yesterday or the day before, that Santos's father has passed away, and I send my condolences out, and I'm very sorry for your loss, Santos. But was watching another program, I think it was today's, or pretty sure, and there was a guy. Oh man, I wish I could remember names. Anyways, he's that guy that I did the video on when I was talking about Santos, and I was putting little clips in of people who are big, you know, flat earthers that have these videos out all over the United States and world or whatever. And I was listening to some of the things that he was saying. Listen to him explain it all over again. Since Santos wasn't there because his father's passed away, they had another guy on, a guy named Logan. I think it's Weiss is the guy that they were interviewing. Not sure his first name now. I may be wrong. Look at how red the stalks of that are. What that is. There's got to be something interesting there, huh? But, as I was listening to things he was saying and not agreeing with most of it, but I felt as though he was almost deliberately leaving out parts of the argument. He was talking about how, well, people say, I don't know if they heard me saying this, or I'm sure a lot of other people have said it, but I was saying that the stars all go in one direction in the northern hemisphere, and they go in the other direction in the southern hemisphere, and that's supposed to be proof of a round ball. And he says that's not true, because if you look up in the sky looking north, the stars are going to go one way, and if you turn and look south, of course they're going to go the other way, even though they're still going the same direction. It's just that you've turned around and you're looking at it from the opposite point of view. But see, I think that's kind of subterfuge and a little bit misleading, because that's not the point. Of course, that's obvious, right? Yeah. What he said is true. You turn around, it's gonna appear to be going the other way. Duh. But that's not the argument. The argument is that there's a North Pole. There's a star that, when you look in the northern hemisphere, you see the pole star, and it seems like all the stars revolve around it. But if you look in the southern hemisphere towards the south, there's a southern pole star, and everything down there revolves around it. So it's very disingenuous to not mention that. Because that actually proves that we're on a ball. However, as I was listening to him, I started having kind of some thoughts. So the dogs went down. This again kind of steep. I'm not wearing any hiking shoes, so I can't. The soles of the shoes I'm wearing are very, very smooth, and they're very slick, so I don't feel like sliding all the way to the bottom to get down to that creek. Oh my goodness. So I kind of got the idea that, you know, we've done this whole series with Ishtar and all the things we've been talking about, and I think it's very important that we covered all of that. We've done it pretty well, I think pretty in depth, going through the old bald-headed out Elisha and what that means. It represents the sun, and Elisha means El is Jesus. And I thought all of the stuff that we covered, I don't know how many videos we did on that, like, was it 5 or 6 or something? Well, I think we're just about done with that. And in the next series, I think we're going to be talking about not the flat earth, because I don't believe we're on a flat earth, but I want to go into a little more in depth about what we are on, just what the universe really is, because there are things I'm in agreement with flat earthers. One, I don't believe we went to the moon the way that, at least I don't believe that, as I said, I've said many times, I don't believe the B-rated movie, whatever, animation thing that they did back in 1960 something or whatever when we went to the moon, made in Hollywood. I don't believe that little clip was a real clip. I mean, it would be, it's like that guy Weiss that they had on the show today said, it's kind of like looking at Jaws, the movie Jaws now, and going, what? That's so fake. You know, oh, that's not real, you know. But back in the day, we probably watched that and thought, oh man, it's so, you know, scary, and we were all caught up and we thought it was real or whatever. Huh. I get ticks all over me going through this brush. Nah, ain't no way to go through this. No way, no way. That's what I don't like about it around here. As beautiful as it is, I don't like all this brush, all the bugs and stickers. That's why I kind of like it in West Oklahoma and the Panhandle of Texas. There's not as much brush, but I do love the beauty of the foliage and all that. I could go through there. Let's see, if you do walk through the brush, you get these spider webs. You walk right through them all with, yeah, it's just terrible. I could do without that. Well, maybe we'll go back down to the river where we were and walk up the river from there. I just want to get down to the creek. But, what was I saying? Got my brakes fixed the other day. So I'm happy about that. And I found out what is my truck hadn't been running well. So I finally put it on the old sensor. The, what do you call it? The diagnostic tool. And it said it had a sensor. And that was all that was wrong with it. Just the one code. It turned on one code. So I bought that, and it was only 20 bucks, so I felt very, very fortunate. Because some of those sensors and sometimes when your vehicle is not running right, it costs a lot more money than 20 bucks to fix it. Huh. There goes Miss Boots. Go a little further. There's some fish. He's gonna jump right in where the fish is at. Isn't that nice water? Yeah. Jump off. Get wet. Get all the baby fish right there. You guys probably couldn't see it a minute ago when I was showing pictures of those huge fish. There's some big ones in there about a foot long. Oh, dogs love the water, don't they? They're swimmers. They know they need a bath once in a while. Cools them off too. Ah, they're sweeties. Sweetie pie. Look at all these fish. Minnows or something. Hundreds of them. Right there. See, they're back up under they go underneath the rock. Little holes. I can't walk up there. Can't get through. So I guess we'll just have to. We could go that way, but there's a car parked over there, and I don't want to bother them. Well, maybe I could go over there a little ways. And if they're over there picnicking or something, I guess I could just, I want my dogs to run over there and say hello and bother them if they're fishing or something. Maybe I can go this way. But so I forgot what I was talking about. I was talking about the flat earth, or the whole subject of what we're living on. So I don't believe. Oh man. Good grief. Like I said, these shoes aren't great. And now I'm wet. Ah, fun. I wouldn't mind being wet, except I didn't want these shoes to get wet because they're leather shoes. Just about fell. There's just hundreds, thousands, and millions of these little fish. Probably can't see them. Everywhere. Whoo-wee. Love the waters here in Arkansas. Definitely a big plus having clean water. Yeah, there's a car up there. I don't know where they are. But, so I'm going to do a whole series on that, I think, or, maybe a video or 2 or 3. Don't know. Usually we start off with 1 and end up doing 3 or 4 or more. So I want to really dig down deep, try and figure out, because they made the point that somebody said, well, who cares whether we live on a ball or a flat earth? Or where we live. I still got to go to work in the morning. It doesn't matter. Well, I agree with flat earthers on lots of things. One of which is that it's not exactly what we've been told. There are lots of things they don't know. But what I think the difference is, I don't think this was all a big lie. I don't think mankind ever knew what we were on in a long time, although anciently they did know. And I think that's where we get the word planet. It comes from, now, this is going to sound strange, and you've probably heard this before, but the planet means the plains. Okay, so people who believe in the flat earth think, well then, if planets are plains, flat surfaces, plains, then the earth must be a plane. But looks like you could hang off that vine right there and swing off. It's not a rope, but you could swing off from that vine right there into the water. But so he was talking about, the model that they have with the flat earth, where the North Pole is the center. And then the Antarctic is the peripheral of the flat earth, the disk. And they claim there's this huge mountain range that goes all the way around, and it's a big ice wall, and that's why the water doesn't run off the flat earth. Well, that's ridiculous. Of course, I believe that's ridiculous. But if the world was flat, I don't think it would just end there. She's exploring. And so the question would be then, what would be beyond that? And this guy named Weiss today showed that picture you've seen before, where beyond the South Antarctic there are other continents or something, or land masses. It's just kind of a white map that you've seen before, maybe. And he said it was from Japan. And he said he had a theory. And this is where I started getting a little respect for the guy, because, I mean, you know, not that I didn't respect him before, but I just did. There's some of their arguments I feel are kind of silly. I'm being honest, okay? There's some wind right now. Hope you guys can hear me. Go back over here. But he mentioned that his theory was, one possibility, is that the sun, if the sun lights up this part of our world, and it goes around like a corkscrew above us, then what gives light to the other continents that are beyond the Antarctic, if there is land out there? And he said, well, maybe that's the planets. And so our sun is giving us light, and out beyond the sun would be maybe the first planet, Venus or something, I don't know, he didn't say, or Mercury. And maybe that is a sun for them, for the next ring outward. And then you keep going and you get to Venus, and then to Mars and Jupiter, and then you go to Saturn. Would be the outer ring, or in this case, plane. Ooh, there's a rope where people are jumping off from that rock over there. That dog loves water. And I thought, well, that's an interesting idea, except I don't believe in flat Earth. And then I was thinking, well, there is one little detail mingled in the ancient wisdom that I always thought was a little odd, and that was that they had 7 planets, and the sun was included as one of the planets. It's the sun and the moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. Why would they not know that the sun is different than the other planets? And so his idea that the planets are all bright balls giving light, but further out because they're further away, and they wouldn't, and all we would see is a little twinkle in the sky way out there. Kind of makes a little sense, although the angles and all that, not sure whether it fits. But now go back to what my theory was that we were talking about back when we were doing the flat Earth videos. We were talking about how each of the planets has a north and south pole. And each north and south pole is like a wormhole that you go from one planet to the other, from one plane to the other. But when you go to the next plane, you come onto another planet. And so you could imagine it as planes stacked upon planes, higher and higher into the sky. But that wouldn't really fit quite exactly right if it was just one huge plane. And it was the larger and larger rings going out further and further out. That wouldn't be the same as different planes stacked on each other. Now, I haven't watched Santos that much. So, granted, I may be wrong, but I think Santos has said in the past that he believes that these planets go up above us, and then there are planes that go down into hell below us. And so it's beneath and above, not outer rings. But what if both of those concepts are true, which is exactly what I said, you know, what we've been talking about in some of my videos. You guys come down here, I don't want you up there where I can't see you. Boots! Come on. Get over here. What are you doing? You don't go up there. messing around with people when they're trying to get in their car. Oh my goodness. You about did a nosedive. Yeah. We did a nosedive. Okay. So, what was I saying? So there's a little bit of a discrepancy whether it's a plane, outer rings of the circumference of a larger plane. So, but in that case, it would just be one flat plane. Now, okay, I was saying, in our original theory, we said that we don't live on a plane or a sphere because it's a hologram. There's a projection. Well, they're talking about projections too. Weiss is talking about this. And he's even saying, we're not quite sure it's a plane exactly the way we think, or we don't understand. He says it's not a ball. He doesn't believe it's a ball. And he still says he believes in the plane, but then sometimes he'll say, we really don't know for sure. I agree with that, and that's honesty. And I you know, I like that. Because we don't really know exactly. And all of this stuff that we're talking about is only just a way that we can explain. A way that makes sense. Where we can use... So we can use math or some theory to explain the world the best we know how. So Newtonian physics turns into Einsteinian relativity. Then, you know, we move on to quantum physics, and now we're off to a hologram universe. But yet all of the methods that we have used in the past to understand, you know, the Newtonian physics still works. So it's still true. It's just, it's like, you know, it's like if you lived in a hologram, then it wouldn't be real, so it wouldn't really be flat or round, and yet you could still use all the math to make it, to prove the Earth was a sphere. Well, remember, if it's all just images in your mind, then the image of what you're thinking... Come on, come on, come on! These people coming. Come on! Come on! Gotta get the dogs in. People are coming. Oh. We'll get back to this thought that I had here in a second when I get the dogs back in the truck, because I don't want them to, anybody complaining because they're not on a leash. Right back. So, why, let's imagine for a second, why would the Earth be flat? Why would it be a ball? You know? Now, science explains why the Earth would be a sphere, because if you're imagining an infinite universe that's physically infinite, okay, with time and space, then you have to understand forms. And so each of these stars that we're seeing in the sky must have some form. We can see their spheres. They look like spheres, although they could be just a light projection, like a beam of light on a screen in the background. I mean, there are other things it could be, but it looks like a sphere. But why would it be, why would the physical hard stuff that we call Earth, why would it form into a ball? Why would all the planets be in round balls? Well, because Einstein explained it that, and we're not going to go into all the details of how that could be, but, you know, there's certainly science to show that this may be true, but gravity pulls things into the center. Because the mass of any object, the more it grows, the more it gains this magnetic pull, and everything just starts, you know, heavy things start going, and they go down towards the center. So inside the core of the Earth or any planet, there would probably be some uranium or plutonium or something, or metals. But then that's kind of odd because Saturn, Uranus, Pluto are on the outer limits, not in the inner. And yet, on the elemental scale, helium's at the top, and air, and then it goes down to fluids, and then at the very bottom, you have the harder metals. So in that sense, the bottom would be the center. But you see that we're using two different parables to describe the same thing: the bottom and the top, or the inner and the outer. Maybe it is simply a way to explain your perception of things. And if it was a hologram, it might be that way. We'll explain that here in a minute further. But it could be both then, because remember, if it's in your mind, then you're projecting everything around you. But in your mind, because you have to understand what you're looking at, you categorize everything. Okay, so you say, I'm looking out. I'm projecting it. So it's coming from the center. But the projection that you see all around you, of course, then wouldn't be heavy or light. It's simply images. So it's the idea that there is hard things and soft things and tall things and short things and colorful things. All that is just then our perception. It's really just images, thoughts. And yet our thoughts have to work based on some sort of system or law or pattern as well. And so maybe it's the patterns in our mind that we're trying to analyze. Kind of like we talked about how we're looking at a motion picture on a screen, and we see a picture of a horse and wagon going down a trail, and they've got 20 miles before they get to town. So we see on the screen in the distance the city 20 miles down in the valley. We say, okay, we can calculate that's 20 miles because this tree is 50 feet tall, and you can get a little stick and put it away from your eyes and until it appears in your vision to be the same length as that tree in the distance. And then you've got a way to measure how far it is from where you're at to town, and you can say, well, I think a scientist would say, I believe it's 20 miles to town. There's no mileage at all. It's all on a screen, a flat screen. There's no distance. You perceive the distance. It's just images on a screen. But the logic in our mind is still saying, no, it's got to be some distance. And we can use math to prove that. In the end, we're just describing colors flashing on a screen. So let's imagine then that above us, the first planet above us would be the sun. The first planet. It goes around and around above us. Well, if we were on the Earth and we wanted to get to the sun, we couldn't get there because of the fact that it's another dimension, another mind concept. Maybe kind of like the subconscious is beneath the conscious mind, and the superconsciousness is above that. We could make different concepts as to what, there may be various layers of the superconscious as well. Okay? But that could be a way to describe the world. The conscious mind is the physical, right? Because we're consciously aware. And the images are permanent. But beneath the surface is the images that are more temporary, like our dreams. In the subconscious, the nightmares arise from there, our fears. But then in the superconscious that really runs the universe is where we've perfected our thoughts in love. The reality. Okay. Something like that. We're just kind of giving a vague outline of some different concepts and showing you how they can all fit together, though they all seem to be contradictory. So that is imagining that, or with a model of the universe that says we're just mind, then we're going to break it down from conscious mind, subconscious mind to superconscious. Superconscious is above, but there is no above. It's just mind. There's no physicality. but we're describing it as above. And now the Bible does this. It talks about beneath and below, and this realm and that realm, and the regions of hell and the regions of earth. Okay. But yet we know that the Bible also is talking about, oh, did you see that fish? It just jumped over there. I think it was a fish. Unless something fell out of the sky. But, leaf just, it's odd because the leaf is going upstream, the water's going that way, downstream, and that leaf is floating upstream. Isn't that weird? A little bit of irony there, because that's what we're talking about, is contradictions. Okay, now it's going, no, it's still going upstream. Isn't that weird? Why in the world would that leaf be going upstream? But in the Bible, we know that there are sort of very clear indications that there's no physicality, because it says that the world that we live in, which is a conscious world that we can touch and smell and breathe, because it talks about it as though it's the trees, the vegetation. And it says, but you throw it in the oven, it's here today, gone tomorrow. You burn it, you make it into bread, you eat it, consume it, and it goes out into the sewer. It was just a temporary world. It's an illusion. It's just mental. It's not permanent. And of course, it says that our Father in heaven is within us. There's another indication that there's some within that is spiritual. The Bible speaks of spirit that's invisible. And this physical is temporary. So we see that there's something like that in the Bible being said. But we're trying to grasp it. Probably because we're floating between different models in our mind. We're trying to perceive the world with several models. I guess kind of like Newtonian physics, Einsteinian physics, and quantum physics. The different models are all accurate ways to perceive the universe, and yet perhaps not accurate. Ultimately, the superior way to perceive is to understand reality, meaning that there really isn't any physical universe. It's only a way to conceive or perceive it. But then there is reality. You don't have to perceive reality, it just is. The reality then would be the one, the true model of the universe then would be the one that's in your mind, that's math, that's just simply spiritual, not the physical. And in that case, the earth could not be flat, because that's physical. But it's just a model. It's just the world, the little model we're living in. And in a sense, it's kind of like Yahweh's kingdom and our Father in heaven. Yahweh has jurisdiction here. Why? If our Father is universal. If He's powerful and is above all and through all and in all. Well, because, as we said, Yahweh's world is just an illusion. He can do all He wants down here and demand you do this, that, and the other thing. And you have to obey Him. But you see, you're not really obeying Him. And then He kills you, but you didn't really die. Because this is just a model. It's not the reality. It works. It seems to be real. People look like they die. People look like they're swimming, or that fish looks like it's there. But it's only a concept in my mind. I'm projecting. But how could these various models weave together so that they, in other words, why would there be any connection between them if they're not even real? Because the unreal is just symbols, not realities. The symbols are stepping stones that help your mind conceive. So, I want to know how big your house is. I get a tape measure. And I say it's 50 feet long. Well, what does that mean? That's just symbolic. What if I don't have... I'm in another country. We don't understand in the sense of feet. We have meters or some other, like I was just watching the boxing match, and, Anthony Joshua lost the heavyweight champion of the world last night, and it was kind of sad. And Alexander Usyk is now the unified heavyweight champion of the world. But, he speaks a different language, and he has to have an interpreter. But the words you hear, you can't understand, but yet it's symbols, but it means the same thing, but it's different symbols. Well, the symbols are accurate for those who know that language. And the reason I even talked about that to start with is that they talk about in Britain, they say he's 16 stones. And I'm like, stones? So we go by that here in America too, because the foot in the pound comes from Britain, from England. But we use the word pound for a little different measurements now. We use it in the sense of weights, but they're still using it in the sense of money because they weighed their money, I guess. But it comes from the same concept. But they're using this, I guess, stone. I don't know. I mean, every stone seems to be a different weight, but somehow or other they've got this word stone to mean a certain amount of weight. So somebody that's 250 pounds is like 18 stones. I'm not sure exactly. I'm just guessing. But anyway, it's just a concept to help you understand reality. So the reality's in your mind now, but you got there using a different measurement, a different language. So perhaps when we say the earth is a sphere, it's accurate and it's true. And we can conceive of it that way because that's the language we speak. You say, well, I'm going around the world. It's a globe. I'm going to fly around the world. I'm going to go to some other place on the other side of the globe. It works. It appears to be round in our minds. But perhaps the reality is something even far more amazing. In that case, I don't believe the earth would be flat. And so that is the reason why I thought that since we're in this world, we're in a concept, we're in a dimension, a mental language, science realm that we conceive of with these laws. How would you get from this realm, this physical realm, to a higher realm? Well, you'd have to change your consciousness. You'd have to be born into it. And people are born from their mother's womb. And the earth is our mother. And so perhaps the womb is the South Pole, where the negative energy comes out and makes the mass. And this is what negative and positive is. We're describing it negative and positive, male and female, and all these things. But it's another way of saying that you have these two energies that are swirling throughout the universe and making everything go round and dividing the world into concepts. But in reality, it's only so that it's only a language for us to understand what we're looking at. And so I developed the concept in my mind, since Shambhala's at the North Pole, and the Bible says that Zion, the city of the great king, is at the North Pole. So I developed the concept that's where the wormhole is. And then the South Pole is where, maybe another wormhole that goes to the lower realms or something. We don't know exactly. See, there again, these leaves are going backwards. But you see the water is running that way. But it's got a little swirl here and it's going up. But see, it's still coming this way over there too. Not sure what's going on there. I guess it's just coming around and going back up. Like a little whirlpool here. But, so even the concept of a wormhole then would be just a way to understand. So our minds are thinking, if we're going to think of the earth as a sphere, then how would we get from this sphere to a higher plane? Thus, plane. Each planet is a plane. We still look at them. You can even see the planets are spheres. and yet they call them planes. Well, why? Because if you kept walking from here, at some point, you would, if you walked far enough, time would pass. You would change. If you're moving in space, it takes time. And as you age, you gain knowledge. You gain experience. You perceive things differently. At some point, you're going to wake up into another reality. Like you go to sleep, you're in your dream world. It's kind of illusionary, and you wake up and it was all just a big dream. But you come into this world, it looks more real, but then people die, and this world wasn't real either, and we go to heaven. Okay. Well, in order to get to heaven, you got to die and be born there. To be born again, Jesus said. You have to have a resurrection, a spiritual body. There's a physical, there's a spiritual. So how do you get from the physical to the spiritual? Well, it has to mean that everything that you see physically has to somehow change your focus. Your mind has to somehow get out of this realm and come into another realm. Everything on this realm would have to break down and go away. Maybe that's what the book of Revelation is talking about when it says that the stars are falling and the mountains are falling and you know, the earth is turned upside down and it's the end of the age and we're going to go into another kingdom, another realm, and another deity will reign. And you know, the deities that reign are the planets. The lowest one being Saturn. In that case, it looks like we're going towards the center. But it's all an illusion. It's all just how you perceive it, right? So perhaps we go from one planet to the next by going out through the wormhole. If you could literally walk to the North Pole, it might be that is where this reality has like a sort of a door. And you would see that the Truman Show, or the True Man, I think that's interesting. They must have named it Truman because it's talking about the reality or the true man. And the true man doesn't belong here in this illusion. It's all a big set. It's a stage. It's just one way to look at the universe, but it's an illusion until we can wake up and grasp something, some higher concept, and then we're in another dimension. So that's how you can understand it. But in this physical world, there has to be a point somewhere where once we wake up, somebody who was watching you, like Elisha was watching Elijah fly up into the sky, and his mantle came down, and he says, if you see me going, you'll receive double portion. And we didn't cover this yesterday and what we were talking about, or I think it was the day before, but when it uses the symbol that Elisha sees him going, that was the requirement for him. If he could do that, he could then have a double portion. In other words, he advances. He gets more advanced. Well, why are you more advanced if you see Elijah going? Okay, I think what that means is that when you understand, see, meaning understand, if you can be aware, if you can, you know how we keep saying, they recognized Christ. And then their eyes were opened. And then that's what gives you the next awareness, the next dimension. You go to the next plane. And Elijah went on a fiery chariot into heaven in a whirlwind. See? So we're going to be able to make that advancement and get a double portion only if we can understand and recognize this world isn't really the correct explanation or language or dimension, that our perception here is going to be as good as our next conception or perception or awareness, but we have to be aware, we have to see it, we have to understand to make the change. Well, Because if Elijah's going to wake up in another higher dimension, Elisha's going to be aware of it. And you say, where'd you go? You know, he's gone. The mountains have crumbled, and this age is, the cities have, the towers have fallen. And the sun goes out, and the moon doesn't give its light. Well, the sun is your consciousness. You know, your higher mind, or some, you know, form of consciousness. And if that form of consciousness goes out, then there has to be a new heavens and a new earth, a new sun, a new world to live in, or a new concept. But somewhere in this world there would have to be, you know, if Elijah was going to leave, and you were going to conceive of him leaving, you'd have to see it in some way, or perceive it. And you might perceive it as though he's going in a chariot or something, because your mind is putting together and using some sort of scientific language to explain that he's not here anymore. And so you say, well, since I only understand physical things, he's on another plane. Well, how did he get there? Well, he left in a vehicle. I think you're gathering a little bit, you know, you're able to gather a little bit of what I'm saying here. I'm trying to, you know, I haven't got any thoughts written down on paper here. I'm just trying to describe this as I sit here on this little river, trying to describe these profound thoughts in my head. So forgive me. But they are profound in my mind. As I try to understand these thoughts, I feel as though these are very important thoughts. That's why I want to somehow explain this. And that's why it's going to take several, maybe a couple of videos at least, because I'm just giving you a preliminary, you know, what we're going to be talking about. But what I'm saying is that if you're going to look at it from a physical point of view, from this, you know, here we are, you and I are physical, we're in this physical world, and I've got to describe this all to you using some language you understand. So why then would there be planets or planes above us anyway? What would be the force that would make those planets go around in our physical world? Now, have you ever wondered why the sun would be in the middle and all the planets would be going around and around and around? They're all in the same plane, like they're all around the same elliptical pretty much, and they all kind of follow the same laws. They all spin in the same directions. Not all of them, but you know, there's always little anomalies and stuff like that, which is also kind of weird. But that's not that weird when you think, like the river. It basically is flowing that way, but there are places in the river where it goes that way. It's a little anomaly. So some of the planets go the opposite, they spin opposite or whatever, for whatever reason. Physics that we don't understand. But how would I describe it? We've talked about the vortices, like hurricanes. They spin because of a high pressure and a low pressure, or so hot and cold come together, and then it has to have equilibrium, and they start spinning. It's almost like they think the galaxy is this big area in space where all this dust is just swirling for no apparent reason. There's no real logic. Science describes the world we live in like this. We're in a galaxy that's swirling around like a big tornado. And about halfway out in this galaxy, the Milky Way, about halfway out on one of the arms that's spiraling, in the Orion arm, is like everywhere in the galaxy, there's all these stars spinning around and around and around. But in our neck of the woods, we've got the sun, and we're going around it and around it. But science doesn't explain that the orbits of the planets around the solar system orbit in the directions in which they orbit in the same way that tornadoes are spun off a hurricane, and meteorologists can explain, because of high pressures and low pressures and so forth, they can tell you why that tornado spun off of the hurricane, because as the hurricane spins, it develops in the middle, it sort of sucks things up from the bottom and spits it out at the top. But in the center, it's going around and around, and it's like all these forces. But once you understand that model, that hurricane vortice model, then I think it's easier to understand why our solar system is spinning inside of another big, huge hurricane called the galaxy. And why it might be doing that, because of these forces that, as we're describing it with our concepts in mind. But one thing I don't think science has ever explained is that the reason that we're going around the sun isn't because we're going around in an elliptical. The sun is being swept up in this vortice. So we're thinking of the Orion arm as a wind that's going around, starting from the center, going out and going around, making a big arm like a hurricane. But we're not being told that that arm is like your arm. It's a round cylinder kind of thing in an arc that, like, put your arm out in front of you, and then with your knuckles straight up, and now twist your wrist and have the knuckles on the bottom. Okay, that spin, your arm is spinning. The Orion arm is spinning at the same time that it's moving around. So the solar system would be the center, and it would be somewhere in the middle of that arm. On the outside of the arm, like the knuckles as it spin, that rotation, those would be the planets going around it. Why would they be going around the sun? Because the sun is caught up in the vortice, and the sun is a bigger, stronger power, and the planets are following it. The only reason the sun is more powerful is that's the center of the storm, more or less. And so then each of the rings thereafter are behind it, following it. Now, if you think of it that way, you understand that instead of the planets going around in an elliptical around the sun, they're actually following in a vortice. Once you grasp that, then you can see that the galaxy itself isn't really a plane, but the center is the front, like a torpedo, and it's spinning as it goes through, and the tail is a vortice. And it's a long tail. That's why comets have tails. Everything has a tail because they're moving. There's time and space involved here. There's another leaf over there that's coming back this way. So, now this is hard. I don't know that I'm explaining this very well, but I'm trying to do my best in this little spur of the moment here by the river. So what we're saying is that the reason we're spinning is because there's a wind that's blowing us around and around. It's blowing us around and around because we're like a lure on a fishing line that's being pulled through the water, and the drag is causing, because there might be a little bit of a lip on that lure, it's going to start spinning. Because one side's a little heavier than the other or whatever, it's going to, as you pull it, it's going to start spinning. And then because it's going through a liquid fluid, it's pushing one force against another, it's causing a ripple effect. I don't know, I'm not describing that very well, but you get some of the gist of what I'm saying. There's reasons for all of the way everything's acting. So each of the, well, I'm saying this because this explains that the planets are various layers, like the sun is first, then the planets follow. They don't all go around in outer rings, one ring being further out than the other. The only reason they're out further, in that direction, is because as the swirling of the vortice goes along, this diameter of the vortice gets larger. And so the spokes of the wheel, if you measure the speed, is going to be faster, because it has to be faster to get from point A to point B, because it's a much larger ring. So you see this with the fact that the Earth takes 24 hours, or I should say 360 days to go around the sun, whereas Mars takes longer, and Jupiter even longer, and Saturn even longer, because they're in the wake of that force, that vortice, and therefore they're going to be further out, but yet further behind in the wake of the tail. Sort of the tail of the dragon. The Bible uses it in the sense of it being a dragon, and there's this tail. Well, that's the tail that drags a third of the stars of heaven. Sorry for the camera going all over the place, because I'm thinking about what I'm saying and not what I'm looking at through the camera sometimes. Okay, so I said all that to explain that each planet then would be a different layer and a further distance behind the sun, and further a larger ring. That would be the science as to why it's doing that. Then you could imagine then that the Earth, from the Earth, we could look out. You could maybe imagine the Earth is first and the sun's in second. Now, I don't know if that's possible. I don't know if there's a way to prove that, or if that's even conceivable, because we assume that the sun is first, and then Mercury, and then Venus, and then the Earth. But what if the Earth is the center? Like some people used to believe. It's a stationary. How could it be stationary? Well, it couldn't be, because everything's moving. Everything's moving except for the void, where there is no concept, where you can't, there's no good or evil, it's just the emptiness. That doesn't sound like a good place to be. I don't think that's where we're at. But regardless of whether the Earth is first or the sun, you're going to have these layers, these planes. But they're not planes, they're spheres. Of course, that's just how we conceive of it. What if it appears in our mind in this physical world to be spheres going around in symmetrical rings further and further out in the wake behind the sun? But in reality, since there is no physical reality here, we're just using a scientific language to describe it. But in the reality, getting beyond the language, what's really going on is that each of these planets are another plane. So then if you got to the North Pole and you went through the wormhole and you ended up on another planet, you'd simply be walking on a flat plane into eternity. But your consciousness would shift like a wormhole, and it would appear that you were dying and being born again, or you go through the wormhole and you pop out somebody else's womb, and you live another life, another concept. But you have to start off as a baby and learn that way until you get older and you learn it, and then you go on to the next realm. Just a thought. And yeah, I think I'll probably just leave it there, because my mind is being distracted by my dogs in the car and stuff, and I need to get back on the road. But that's the kind of thing we're going to be talking about. I'm just giving you some concepts, but we're going to dig down into scriptural proofs, scientific proofs, analogies. We're going to go back to the original words, what they originally meant, like the fact that the word planet means plane, and why it means that, and does it have to mean that it is a physical plane? Therefore, each planet may be a different realm, a different plane, but not necessarily, from our perspective, a flat plane. But, in conclusion, what I'm saying is, I'm not so far apart from flat earthers as I was, simply because I'm trying to integrate some of these. It seems like there's so many flat earthers. And if this is caught on, It's like people like to be rebellious. They like to have a new concept. They want to dig down. They know that everything NASA's saying is a lie. And I agree with them. And so we're trying to find the truth. So I'm not going to just say, ha ha ha, these stupid flat earthers. Although I think some of their ideas are silly. But look. There is some good stuff in there that we can use. And there's some good stuff in our current way of thinking that we can use. But what we got to do is go back to the original esoteric wisdom. And as we've done that a little bit, but we're going to try to do that a little bit more and then put it together with some of the thoughts that we've had and see if we can perceive the real meaning, interpret the correct, a more exalted meaning, a more synchronistic with higher points of view meaning. A different way of looking at things that might be a higher way of looking at things. I don't think we're going to, that's going to be the flat earth view, but I think it's going to incorporate some of their questions. It's going to answer some of their questions. It might even be closer to the flat earth in some ways than it is to our present model, but it's not going to be exactly either way. I think, just to say this before we go here, I do think, though, that the earth is a sphere, or appears to be a sphere, for us who live on this world. I can prove that by the fact, as we've said before, that when you're in the southern hemisphere and you're looking south, you see the southern pole star. And everything revolves around that pole star in the south. And in the north, everything revolves around the northern pole star. And that proves that the earth is a spinning ball with two poles, with like a pole jammed through the middle of this ball, and a pivot at each end, which makes all the stars revolve around the northern and the southern pole. That could only be a sphere. But that is only how we perceive it in this physical world. Actuality, though, in the true understanding, in a higher concept of the universe, it's not really a sphere. It's, you could just keep walking from here, walk to the North Pole, and walk into another dimension, and you would disappear in as regards this plane. You'd go into another world, even though you never disappeared. You were just walking, and time went by, and you experienced knowledge, and you woke up consciously and became more aware of higher things. And when you were a babe, you spoke as a babe, but now that we're adults, we speak as adults. And we eat food that belongs to adults. And in other words, we talk with a language that's more superior. It helps us understand the universe and helps us to integrate higher realms and higher thoughts. So I'm going to leave it there and get back on the road, guys, and try to load this, and we'll see you tomorrow. Have a good one.